give a little introduction, even though we don't need her introduction. Pretty much everybody knows her. Pravrajika Brahmaprana joined the Sharada convent at the Vedanta Society of Southern California in 1973 and has been an ordained Sannasini since 1984. She has been a Vedanta representative on several interfaith councils in America, including the Hindu Catholic Dialogue sponsored by the Archdiocese of Los Angeles and the Snowmass Interspiritual Dialogue, founded by Thomas Keating, OCSO, a guest lecturer at schools, colleges, and universities in America and India, and has participated in interfaith and scholastic seminars in America and abroad. Brahmaprana has compiled and edited several books on Vedanta, including the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. Volume 9, Vivekachuramani of Sri Shankaracharya, translated by Swami Turiyananda, with the Swamis in America and India, and A Light to the West, the life and teachings of Swami Prabhavananda. She has also written numerous articles on the philosophy and practice of Vedanta for journals and anthologies in America and abroad. Brahmaprana is currently the resident minister of the Ramakrishna Vedanta Society of North Texas in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Let's welcome Madhavi.
Thank you, Srimati. Good evening, everyone, in here and out there. It's a joy to be here at this wonderful center. The atmosphere in the shrine is just so overwhelming. It's wonderful. I'd like to begin this with a chant and then a guided meditation that Vivekananda used to give in his Raja Yoga classes. Om Vanme Manasi Pratishtitam Mano Me Vachi Pratishtitam Aviraviramayeti Vedasya Ma'anishtaha Shrutam Me Ma Prahasi Anenaditena Oratran Sandatami Ritam Varishyami Satyam Varishyami Tadmamavatu Tadbhaktaramavatu Avatu Mam Avatu Bhaktaram Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. May my speech be one with my mind, and may my mind be one with my speech. O thou self-luminous Brahman, remove the veil of ignorance before me, that I may behold thy light. Do thou reveal to me the spirit of the scriptures. May the truth of the scriptures be ever present to me. May I seek day and night to realize what I learned from the sages. May I speak the truth of Brahman. May I speak the truth. May it protect me. May it protect my teacher. This is a mindfulness meditation, ancient Sankhya Vedanta meditation, very simple. Let us begin by sitting straight in our chairs, chest slightly forward, our hands held in our lap, right palm upturned on our left upturned palm, held loosely in our lap. To hold this meditation, close our eyes and take 3 deep breaths, breathing in deeply and exhaling completely. Picture the mind as a calm lake stretched before you. Let the mind drift. See how thoughts come and go as bubbles, rising and breaking on the surface, becoming ripples that are ever widening circles. Make no effort to control the thoughts, but watch them. Follow them in imagination as they rise, break, and float away. I am not the mind. I see that I am thinking. I am watching my mind act. Hold fast to the idea. I am the witness, watching my mind drift. The mind is not I. Watch the mind as a thing entirely apart from yourself. Identify yourself with God, never with the mind or matter. Be the witness. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Tonight's topic is from a sannyasini's diary, Memories of Great Monks. It was always my habit as a young nun to keep a diary of the teachings of these great monks that I would meet either in Santa Barbara, Hollywood, at other centers in the United States, or in India. Today's talk is going to spotlight Swami Asesananda, Holy Mother's disciple, who lived from 1899 to 1996. You can see him on the lower right-hand screen. He's in the front row and to the left, to the extreme left. This picture was taken during Swami Prabhavananda's memorial service in July 1976. Swami Asesananda had been Swami Prabhavananda's assistant at the Vedanta Society of Southern California until 1955, when he was posted as head of the Vedanta Society of Portland. During my time as a young nun in the Santa Barbara convent, Swami Asesananda came once to perform the inauguration of the newly built Hollywood convent building in 1973, which is now the monastery. In July 1976, he came again as the senior-most Swami at Swami Prabhavananda's memorial service. After the service in the Hollywood Center, he, along with the other heads of centers in the United States, came to Santa Barbara to give a second service and spend time with the convent members there. And then, as the Swamis were leaving for the airport, Swami Asesananda shared with us, we were all gathered, all of the nuns with all of the Swamis, with us intimate experience he had at the Portland Center on the night of Swami Prabhavananda's Mahasamadhi, which occurred a few minutes past midnight on the 4th of July, 1976, the bicentennial year. Swami Asesananda said to us, "Maybe it's just my imagination, but on July 4th, I was awake. I heard Swami Prabhavananda's voice, 'Brother Kiran, I have gone to the feet of Maharaj,' meaning Swami Brahmananda, his guru." Swami continued, "Right after that, I got the phone call from the Vedanta Society of Southern California that Swami Prabhavananda had passed away." This was Swami Asesananda, always cloaking his spiritual life with humility. Maybe it's just my imagination, he told us, but we all knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was his experience. Swami Asesananda was a man of God, intimately connected with the spiritual realm. This he showed by the power of his life and his teachings. So let me share some of those incidents and teachings that have stayed with me these last 45 years. He described his initiation to Sri Sarada Devi. He was introduced to Sarada Devi by Rashbihari Maharaj. In their pre-monastic days, Swami Akhilananda, who became the head of the Boston and Providence Vedanta societies, and young Kiran used to go to the house of Balaram Bose, a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, to have darshan of Swami Brahmananda, known simply as Maharaj. One evening, Maharaj was not present there, so they walked to the Udbodhan, which was 10 or 15 minutes away by foot, where they knew Sri Sarada Devi was staying. Swami Dhirananda met them and asked young Kiran outright, "Who will take your responsibility?" Now the Swami Asesananda, the future Swami Asesananda, had studied Kant, Hegel, Plato. So he replied, "I am a rugged individualist. I can take my own responsibility." Swami Dhirananda wisely said, "You do not know anything, not anything about spiritual life. In spiritual life, there should be a teacher, a guide who holds the torch and shows you the way." He went on, "Suppose you go to a cave temple, which is all dark. If you are alone, you bump your head on the walls. But if you find a priest who holds the torch, then you can see the deity unhurt and be satisfied." Kiran said, "What do you mean?" Swami Dhirananda then said, "Holy Mother is upstairs. You should go and ask for her grace to initiate you into spiritual life." The first time Kiran saw Mother, Rashbihari Maharaj, a brahmachari attendant, took him upstairs at the Udbodhan, and Sri Sarada Devi was veiled. Rashbihari Maharaj told Kiran not to speak. So he simply prostrated, touched her feet, and returned downstairs. Swami Dhirananda was waiting for him. "Did you ask for initiation?" he asked. Kiran said, "No, I was not permitted to speak." Swami Dhirananda then took him back upstairs and explained to Holy Mother that Kiran was a Brahmin, that he had spiritual association with Swami Brahmananda, and was a college student. The second time Kiran saw Sarada Devi, she was unveiled, and Kiran asked for initiation. But Sarada Devi replied, "Why, my child? You go to Rakal," meaning Maharaj. "Rakal can give you initiation, so why ask me?" Kiran blurted out, "Mother, if you shower your grace, I will consider it a great privilege and my good fortune." Sarada Devi then said, "Come after 2 days." At that time, Kiran was only 17 years old. He didn't know about the Divine Mother. It was Swami Sardananda who opened his eyes. Also, he was worried about the mantra Mother would give, as he already had a chosen ideal. On the day of initiation, Mother performed a worship and initiated him. And Swami said, "The mantra rang a bell in my heart." Swami Asesananda used to reminisce. And Kiran returned in 2 days with a rosary, and Sarada Devi showed him how to use the rosary and how to meditate on the Ishta. Swami Sardananda came into Kiran's life on the first day he saw Holy Mother. On that day, Kiran had left his shoes at the bottom of the stairs leading to Sarada Devi's room at the Udbodhan. When he came downstairs and began talking with Swami Dhirananda, he heard a booming voice from the next room. "Let the boy who has left his shoes on the threshold come here." He followed the voice to the next room, and there, dominating the room, was the imposing figure of Swami Sardananda, disciple of Sri Ramakrishna and General Secretary of the Ramakrishna Order. "Do these shoes belong to you?" he asked him. "Yes, Maharaj." "By keeping them on the threshold, you inconvenience others. You should have put them where they belong, under the staircase." Stern rebuke awakened fear in young Kiran, and he avoided the Swami for 4 years afterwards, though later he became Swami Sardananda's personal attendant. Once I smiled on hearing Swami Asesananda scolding a young woman devotee in the same way in the Portland Center, as she had, without thinking, left her shoes on the threshold of the center's library doorway. In this way, when we come within the orbit of the Ramakrishna Vedanta tradition, teachings and even scoldings from our teachers are handed down from Ramakrishna himself, as is the case when a seemingly small outward behavior reflects an inner impediment that great souls can clearly see and then try to root out. Though in ecstasy throughout the day, Sri Ramakrishna was methodical in his actions and taught his disciples to be precise in all that they undertook. In this way, one's outer and inner life become orderly. Once Swami Turiyananda, Hari at the time, borrowed a penknife from Sri Ramakrishna's room in order to peel the fruits for a picnic at the Panchavati at Dakshineshwar. Yes, Sri Ramakrishna picnicked with the young monks in the Panchavati at Dakshineshwar. But on returning it, he put it in a different place. Sri Ramakrishna then trained his young disciple. "If you put it in a different place, I will have to hunt for it everywhere. Always remember to return a thing where you found it." One day, Swami Sardananda called Kiran to his room and asked if he would be able to take dictation and write his letters. And so Kiran became Swami Sardananda's personal secretary at the Udbodhan from 1921 to 1927, a relationship that lasted long after Holy Mother's passing. One day, Swami Asesananda asked Swami Sardananda, "Holy Mother instructed me in a very simple way. She didn't ask me to repeat the mantra for a fixed number of times in the morning or the evening, or for special days. She did not give me any fixed method. I want a step-by-step method. Can you give me that?" Swami Sardananda replied, "You are the greatest fool. Holy Mother is the Divine Mother herself. All these methods and procedures are given by other teachers, but not Holy Mother. Whatever Holy Mother has given you is the last word in spiritual life." He went on, "Cling to the mantra, repeat it, meditate, and think of your chosen ideal, and when the longing for vision of God comes, you will find that your mind will automatically know it, and that your mind will be fixed on the divine spirit, and that all your desires will be fulfilled." In this connection, Swami Asesananda related how a young Chandra Mohan Datta, a disciple of Sarada Devi, used to go to the Udbodhan for her darshan. He would simply take the dust of her feet and blurt out, "Prasad," which she would then give him. He was very shy. One day, Swami Shuddhananda, later the president of the order, instructed the shy Chandra, "Ask Mother for liberation." So Chandra climbed the stairs of the aboden and entered her room where she sat, fully veiled. He prostrated, then looked up, but there beneath her veil was the face of Mother Kali. "Prasad!" he cried out and ran downstairs as fast as he could. After Swami Prabhavananda's passing, I would spend 2 weeks a year with Swami Asesananda at the Portland Vedanta Center. He had a very different temperament from Swami Prabhavananda, but these Swamis each gave such uplifting teachings, unforgettable lessons in life, cherished sacred memories, and conveyed such a spiritual mood that left indelible impressions I carry within me to this day. And they transcended any personal idiosyncrasies or prefabricated mold for how we might think a holy personality should act or appear. For example, Swami Asesananda was the embodiment of frugality, unsurpassed. He insisted nothing should be wasted. Leftovers at the center were served again and again and again until finally and thankfully they disappeared. If fruits from the supermarket arrived bruised or defective in any way, they were returned and exchanged at the store. The store manager knew Mrs. Vera Edwards. She was a saint. Swami Asesananda's right-hand devotee. He knew her very well. She was simply fulfilling the wishes of her old, venerable Swami. Swami Asesananda loved to cook rice pudding for the shrine offering, but he would stretch the recipe by adding leftover Oreo cookie crumbs. So every bit of leftovers was used up and there was plenty for everyone. He was so original. Plastic bags, before we became aware of the green movement, were washed and reused innumerable times. And during karma yoga outdoors, Swami would routinely take an old broom to sweep the temple parking lot. He was out there with everyone else, bristles of which were worn to the wood. How could Swami sweep debris with such a broom? He refused to throw it away. In fact, when an efficiency-minded guest devotee replaced the worn-out broom, the leaking hose, and the dilapidated rakes that the gardeners had to use, Swami gave him a full-throated scolding. "You have no right to do those things." Then later, he softened and explained. "You see, these things, the hoses, the brooms, all of it, they are like old dear friends, and you can't just throw them away." His own appearance spoke of such frugality in clothing. One could easily mistake him for a homeless person if it weren't for the fact that he was usually surrounded by a group of very conventionally dressed devotees. When Swami went out walking, he wore a beret that Swami Prabhavananda had given him years before. It was partially torn, but rather than discarding it, he placed a clean handkerchief in the hole of the beret because he cherished the memory of his brother monk so. The same with his worn, oversized overcoat the Swami Nikhilananda had gifted him. Many cherished memories of Swami Asesananda are there. Holy Mother's cat was one such. Swami did not allow his monks or devotee women who lived in the center's houses for dedicated single women to own a pet. But one day, a cat wandered onto the property, dehydrated, hungry, and dying of feline leukemia. Daily, Swami nursed that cat by giving it Ganges water and Mahaprasad, the great sanctified offering, the Mahaprasad, dry ras offering from the Puri Jagannath temple. The cat recovered. What happened next? Swami Asesananda permitted Holy Mother's cat everywhere on the society's property, including the shrine. Monks were told to organize daily patrols so it wouldn't wander off the property. Swami used to address the cat as Kitty, and he insisted that it be present for all his lectures and classes. Kitty is my best student, he used to say, and he explained to me that the cat could feel the tanmatras, the spiritual vibrations in the temple and from the spiritual talks. It was Swami's conviction that was enough for this cat's spiritual progress. When I pressed him further, he admitted that he had even given his pet student the Shiva mantra. Holy Mother's cat finally died, and I was privileged to be at the center when this took place. We brought the cat to a veterinary hospital. It had kidney failure. And the cat's body was brought back to the center and into the shrine. Swami knelt with the cat in his arms before a large shrine photo of Holy Mother. I watched from the doorway. The tenderness of that moment left an indelible impression. After 10 or 15 minutes, Swami arose and left the shrine. He then announced that a memorial service for Holy Mother's cat was going to take place and was mandatory attendance for the monks and all the devotees present. Usually when I went, there were devotees that had come from all over the world, not to speak of the United States, and they were accommodated there. The memorial service took place in the garden. A grave was dug, Swami chanted, prayers were said, and all of us offered a flower. 12 people attended. The next day, when Swami was in the shrine pantry, which was right next to the shrine, he told me, referring to Holy Mother's cat, "You know, it is better that they go away than that they die." He then disclosed, "When I would be out gardening and watering the plants, the kitty would suddenly dash out from under the plants. I miss that." He then shared that through its association with the Swami, much was done for the kitty spiritually. Its consciousness had developed from where it was, as he explained, to the borderline of human evolution in its next life. But, the Swami added, it's very difficult to explain. That private moment and soft expression in the Swami's eyes is one of the memories that I cherish most when recalling my days with Swami Asesananda. I felt privy to be near such a great soul at such an intimate moment. Swami Pravrajika also used to tell us that any person or creature that ventured onto our temple grounds was blessed. Shortly after this memorial service for the kitty, a bird flew into the center's window and died. Swami Asesananda told the monks to get a shovel and dig a grave. A bystander tittered, and Swami whirled around. "No creature that comes onto this property is insignificant," he scolded. There was a pin-drop silence, and it made a deep impression on all who were present. Once a devotee doctor from New York sent Swami a letter. Now, Swami accumulated letters, often unread, Then after 6 months, he would throw them away. He had no time to respond to such a huge worldwide correspondence. 6 months later, the doctor phoned. Swami, remember that letter I sent you? There was a check in it. Fortunately, the doctor had guessed what had happened when the cashed check didn't show up on her bank statement. Swami rummaged through the pile of discarded letters and finally, luckily, retrieved the check donation. Such humorous stories only endeared the Swami to his devotees. He was most unusual. Swami Asesananda didn't like taking money from monastics who stayed as guests at his center. We Santa Barbara nuns were regular visitors there, and we would visit for several weeks at a time and felt duty-bound to leave donations for the food, at least. So the Swami figured the bill to the penny. It came up $3 a day. And he would return any amount that exceeded that. Swami Asesananda taught in various unexpected ways. Routinely, he arranged for the center's devotees to accompany out-of-town guests to the grotto in Portland. Multnomah Falls, the grotto, the Rose Garden, these were places of pilgrimage in Portland that he would send us every visit. When Swami asked me to go, being tired from the day's air travel, I tried to excuse myself. I'm too tired, I said, but Swami corrected me. You, meaning all women, are replicas of the Divine Mother. Never say you are tired. What a beautiful teaching. So simple, and it made such a deep impression. He taught us to live what we were aspiring towards, to reach higher and go beyond any sense of fatigue, beyond bodily idea altogether, which he himself exemplified to an extraordinary degree. Swami used to request me to make flower arrangements for the shrine at the Portland Center. And one day, I noticed in one shrine wall niche where Mother Kali's image and painting were worshipped, Swami had placed a disciple's letter along with the monthly bulletin behind her photograph. Such a simple, direct method of offering, and a precious reminder to surrender everything to the Lord. In the daily worship, at the time of the food offering, and Swami did the daily worship whenever he was there at the center, Swami would leave his seat of worship, enter the shrine pantry next to the shrine, and personally chop up the fruit offering. And he used a large knife and was meticulous and deliberate in the chopping. In the shrine, we could hear the loud rhythmic chopping noise. Chop, chop, chop. But it became a sweet part of my meditation. At this time, he had told me once he would remember his golden years with Swami Sardananda at the Udbodhan while he was chopping the prasad. He'd remember and mentally relive the service he'd given Swami Sardananda, pumping water for his bath and other chores, and how Swami would call out to him, "Kiran, bring the water." Once I had to leave the shrine at that time to deliver a message to Swami. I went to the threshold of the pantry, and when Swami looked up at me, I'll never forget the indrawn, bliss-filled expression in his eyes. To Swami, my form was at that moment merely a shadow play, compared to the reality he was experiencing within himself. Such a powerful, indrawn, and blissful expression. And reliving the memories of his days serving Swami Sardananda at the Udbodhan had taken him there. I spoke just a few words, then came away quickly so as not to disturb his mood. Sometimes Swami Asesananda used the shrine as an arena for scolding. Yes. Once during worship, Swami went into the shrine pantry and called out to the president of the board, Mr. Bush, who was meditating in the shrine, buy me a one-way ticket to Chicago. Mr. Bush quickly executed Swami's request, and Swami's voice rang out from the shrine pantry again. Anyone who does not come to the shrine to meditate does not belong to this center. He was referring to a novice who habitually stayed in his room during the noon worship. It was a strong teaching, and the young inmate who failed to keep regular meditation hours in the shrine was dispatched back to Chicago. Swami Asesananda was uncompromising when it came to regularity in meditation, and in this way he taught how our spiritual life revolves around the shrine. Swami Asesananda was a late night person, and so also he was a late morning riser. 8:30 a.m. was his time. One evening, I had a 10 p.m. interview upstairs in the monastery in a very simple room called Buddha Hall. It was a bedroom, formerly a bedroom. It's just a very small room. But as I climbed the stairs, I felt privy to the sanctity of the monastery atmosphere at that late hour where a sadhu of Swami Asesananda's stature had lived so many years. It seemed the building itself was a replica of his inner realm. The walls seemed to vibrate with consciousness. That night, Swami talked about the efficacy of worship. One evening past midnight, he was putting the Lord to bed in the shrine, putting little blankets over the pictures, covering the holy pictures with cloths, and suddenly he heard Sri Ramakrishna's voice, Kiran, Kiran, your hair. Swami had bent too low over the votive light in front of the master's photo. Sri Ramakrishna's warning voice drew his attention to his hair, which had caught on fire. Quickly, he was able to put it out. Swami Asesananda shared such personal examples of how our worship becomes living. To Swami, daily worship was conversation with God, natural and real. And that God, our chosen ideal, always protects us. On this late evening interview, Swami shared such an intimate truth. It was a rare and special moment. Swami never let anybody touch the shrine itself. He always performed the worship, arthritic as he was. Unless he was invited to another center, then one of his monks performed the worship. When Swami performed daily puja, a monk would prepare the sandal paste and place the shrine vessels on the altar. Devotees would pick the flowers, wash them, and arrange them. Nobody was allowed to touch the holy pictures. One day, when Swami knelt before the shrine, he called out, "Who has touched the shrine? Who has touched the shrine?" Swami knew just by looking at the shrine, someone had violated his cardinal rule. Swami Asesananda cherished a mystic relationship with those shrine photos. He explained to me, "I am not like the Devi Giriji in Uttarkashi, no photo of Sri Ramakrishna. I have lawns to mow and flowers to please Sri Ramakrishna. He is more than a photo. He is a living presence." When devotees would arrive, he would bless them with a special photo of Holy Mother in the shrine pantry. It was all splattered with water. Swami had such glaucoma he could not see the water splatters. One day he divulged in a private interview, "There is one photo of Holy Mother that is very special to me. I think, what a special one. She appeared to me as Maha Karuna, embodiment of compassion. I cannot do without that." He explained, "I was in the stormy seas. He was crossing the ocean to come to America for the first time. I was all alone and she came and protected me. I can never forget. This photo has more manifestation of power. Her presence is felt more." Swami trained the devotees how to pick and prepare the flowers for the worship. One day he looked out of the monastery window and saw that I was doing all the flower picking as the trainee stood by watching. "Start picking the flowers," he called out through the window to the trainee. "You learn only by doing." Somehow, these simple teachings have stuck with me through all these years. You learn by doing. Swami's scoldings were famous. They reached the pitch that could shatter glass. Seriously. He was also so original. On Thanksgiving Day, he scolded an entire nation. Just before that day, I had given him a Native American peace pipe from my family's collection for his Native American shrine at the center's Scappoose retreat. At the top of the monastery stairs, Vera Edwards and I, at the bottom, the drama unfolded. Swami paced back and forth as he called out to his listeners, "I prefer to call this day Thankless Day, not Thanksgiving Day." Then followed a litany of scoldings against the American nation, our values, our atrocities committed against the Native Americans. Swami explained, "We all have our individual karma, our family karma, our national karma, and a world karma." Thus, on Thanksgiving Day, Swami Asesananda was doing his part to erase some of our national karma. Swami could also be as gentle as a flower petal. Once he stated, "A father loves most his prodigal son, not the son who is always good." He nurtured his flock of devotees with the prasad he cooked himself, gave loving advice, trips to the beach. Yes, after my sannyas vows, he took me along with the Portland devotees that were staying there all to the Oregon coast. Retreats at Scappoose, private interviews, follow-up phone calls, prayers for his disciples. For the visiting nuns and the single women living near the center, he sent Vera Edwards out to buy his gift of blouses for all of us. He would offer them in the shrine to Holy Mother and then give them to each of us. And those gifts were treasures. He played an intimate part in each devotee's life. Once Swami admitted to me, "Though I scold the Americans and say that I do not care for them, I love them. I love the Americans." And the testament to this statement was after coming to America, he never returned to India, not even for a visit. Swami trained by example. He was completely unapproachable when gardening. He was so passionate that all devotees should contribute to the center's landscape and garden. During this time, he wore the fiercest expression. Nobody dared to approach him. When sweeping with his long-handled, bristleless broom, watering the plants, dragging the hose, trudging around the building, he was concentrated, his brows furrowed in a deep scowl. When I asked the devotees there why this was so, Nobody knew, and no one dared to ask him. So one day, I asked him, and he replied, "While working, I'm meditating on a shloka of the Gita. I take one Gita shloka and think about that. Or sometimes I think deeply about the subject for my Sunday lecture. This is called contemplation." And that taught me how to use my time wisely. That teaching came from Swami Turiyananda, when once he was asked how to study the Gita. He said, "If you really want to study, take one shloka and meditate on it every day for a week. That is real study." Swami Asesananda put that teaching into practice, which I felt fortunate to witness for myself. Through the years, I have kept journals of teachings from some of the great Swamis with whom I've had the privilege to associate with. And after my interviews with Swami Asesananda, I would go into the shrine, record his teachings verbatim. These were private teachings. One day after an interview with the Swami, I went to the library to record. It happened to be the time for noon worship. Others were meditating, and one devotee kindly warned me that Swami would always want me in the shrine at that time. But I stayed instead to finish my journal entry. It was a cloudy day. I was straining my eyes as I wrote. Suddenly I heard footsteps on the stairs. They were Swami's. He came all the way down the stairs, and he stopped at the library door. Will he scold me for not meditating at this time, I wondered. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Swami, I'm just writing down everything you told me today." "Very good," he said, and switched on the light so that I could see better. This was one of the rare instances that Swami excused anyone from meditation. Today, years after Swami Asesananda's passing, certain teachings that were not so prominent then have now become more useful and beneficial. His teachings were unique, personal, and multi-layered. Reading through my journals, I would marvel, wow, what an important message he gave then. And as the years rolled by, Swami Asesananda shared more intimately when I was with him. Sometimes reminiscences of the direct disciples or Holy Mother. One day he described Holy Mother's passing. He said her body became so thin and emaciated, but after her Mahasamadhi, it was luminous like Mother Durga. Before Belar Mat was founded, Swami Vivekananda wanted to establish a women's mat. Referring to this, Swami Asesananda shared, Swami Yogananda, who served as Mother's attendant, knew Swamiji's plan to make Mother the head of the women's mat. So he told him to Vivekananda, "Don't bring Mother into the public. She won't live long if you do." One beautiful moment with Swami took place right after my sannyas in 1984. He talked privately with me about the sannyas vows, their meaning, how powerful the mantras are, what a mood they create. And out of the blue, I asked, "Swami, do you ever see Brahman?" He laughed sweetly. "Yes, but not when I have too many administrative responsibilities." Such a wonderful mood he was in. "Have you ever felt sad or depressed?" I asked. "Yes, when I'm ill. Then the mind goes down a little. I'm not able to do the Lord's work. At that time, I do some japa, and then the mind rises again." Swami Asesananda was a mystic. When he came to Santa Barbara to administer monastic vows to some of our nuns, he would stay for a few days. One day he was relaxing at the convent dining table after lunch when one of our senior nuns asked him, "Swami, when did you realize Holy Mother was the Divine Mother? In India or here in this country?" "Here," he said. Vera Edwards, this close disciple of the Swami and a wonderful saintly devotee, shared with me how she was once privy to an experience he had received at the Portland Center's 120-acre densely wooded Scappoose retreat overlooking the Columbia River. It was after a lecture he had given in the large hall there, and it was very dark, when Swami asked Vera and her sister to drive him to a shabby little meditation cabin there, where Devatmananda used to stay. He asked them to wait outside the cabin, and suddenly in the night, they both felt a strong force, so strong they were overawed. A few minutes later, Swami came out of the cabin and said he had seen Holy Mother and Swami Saradananda. Swami Asesananda would occasionally send me to the Seattle Vedanta Center, especially when Swami Vivedishananda, Swami Brahmananda's disciple, was still alive. In the 1970s, Swami Vivedishananda visited the Vedanta Society of Southern California, and when he came to Santa Barbara, we asked him what was essential in spiritual life, and he shared, "Learn to memorize scriptural verses and sacred songs. In your old age, when you can no longer see or hear, you will still be able to live in the holy company of what you have memorized." To live in the holy company of what you have memorized. In the late 1970s, Swami Asesananda sent me to the Seattle Center to have the darshan of Swami Vivedishananda, who lay in a coma after having suffered a massive stroke in 1974. He lived 6 years in a coma until his passing in 1980. When I entered his room, it was like a shrine. The atmosphere was so intense, so thick, and I then remembered the advice he had given us to memorize the sacred scriptures in order that they become our holy company when our senses fail us in later life. At that time, his attendant monk, Swami Manishananda, shared a spiritual experience Swami Vivedishananda had at the beginning of the Seattle work, when the attendance remained small and he became discouraged. Manishananda said, "One day, Swami Brahmananda appeared, as in a dream. His body expanded to become all-pervasive. Swami Vivedishananda then understood that his work in Seattle was the Lord's work, and whatever he did or did not accomplish was ultimately his will, and his depression lifted." So these associations with holy personalities tell the story of our lineage. By reliving them in our mind, they open the door of the heart. They sink deep into our heart, and they give us a felt darshan. As they did with Swami Asesananda, when he used to relive his days with Swami Saradananda as he chopped fruit prasad for his worship. For those who have not met the disciples of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, we also can bring our spiritual lives alive by reading and contemplating the divine Leela of Sri Ramakrishna, Sarada Devi, Swami Vivekananda, and the direct disciples, by meditating on those incidents, and by doing so, we personalize our spiritual life. We try to feel in our hearts that we are there with these great teachers, experiencing them firsthand, directly. Sri Ramakrishna and Sarada Devi are talking to us, instructing us, guiding us as a father or mother teaches their beloved child. In doing that, we enrich ourselves and become blessings to others. I'd like to close with a guided meditation that Swami Vivekananda gave in this country on strength. It was at Camp Taylor in the Redwoods, where he trained a few Western disciples in the style of the ancient Indian rishis, forest dwellers, who chose the elements of nature to expand the mind and heart. One of his American students, Ida Ansel, recorded, "I close my eyes and see him, Vivekananda, standing there in the soft blackness with sparks from the blazing log fire, flying through it and a day-old moon above." Swami said to us, "You may meditate on whatever you wish, but I shall meditate on the heart of a lion. That gives strength." So let us close our eyes, sit straight in our chairs, hands held loosely in our lap, and take in 3 deep breaths. Breathe in purity and expel all impurity. Breathe in strength and expel all weakness, all low, mundane thoughts. Picture the lion in the heart. The heart is the center of our sense of identity, the center of our being. Dwell on the spiritual qualities represented by the lion. It radiates strength, fearlessness, majesty, mastery, freedom. The lion is a creature of the savannah. It has no enemies and therefore fears no one. It knows that it is a match for all circumstances. Let us feel we are established in that strength. Know you are free. Strength blazes from the eyes of the lion. It illumines our heart, courses outward into the thought channels of our mind, our veins, the sinews of our arms, hands, and feet. Our body is filled with strength. Our mind is established in strength. We know the self, the Atman, fears nothing, not even death. We are centered in that which transcends time, space, and all that belongs to this fleeting world of matter. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So I thank you all